1 minute ago, something happened. Something so quietly devastating, so unexpectedly dull yet heavy, that even Jay Leno himself had to pause, adjust his glasses, look down, and say a few flat words that changed everything. If you think this is another entertainment update, it isn't. This is something much heavier. And honestly, unbelievably boring. Jay Leno, the man people once associated with late-night laughter, predictable monologues, and an extensive collection of cars, sat in a chair that looked far more ordinary than anything he owned. The lighting around him was not dramatic. It was not interesting. It was simply bright enough. There was no tension in the room, no suspense, no music, just Jay, breathing slowly, blinking occasionally, and preparing to say something he clearly didn't want to say. He started with a sigh, not a loud sigh, a small one, the kind of sigh people make when they realize they left a cup of tea on the counter for too long. His hands were folded neatly, almost too neatly, as though he was trying to keep them from shaking. Not out of fear, but out of the kind of calm resignation that comes from knowing something unpleasant must be addressed. Before he spoke, he looked down at a paper. It wasn't even an important-looking paper, just a plain white sheet, a little bent on the corner. Nothing dramatic. Then, finally, in a tone so plain it almost felt unreal, Jay said, "Well, I guess we should talk about it." Nothing more. No dramatic opening. No emotional explosion. Just a flat observation, spoken by a man who has delivered far too many monologues in his life to care about making this one interesting. It wasn't until several seconds later that he continued, "You know, life is, well, life. And sometimes things happen. And, this is one of those times." The moment was so uneventful that someone watching might lean closer, waiting for something meaningful to follow. But Jay did not rush. He took another breath, adjusted his glasses again, looked vaguely to the left, then back to the camera. His usual comedic energy was nowhere to be found. He seemed older, somehow, not just physically, though the wrinkles on his forehead looked deeper and his posture slightly more slouched, but mentally, emotionally, like someone carrying a burden that doesn't explode, but slowly presses down on the shoulders until movement becomes tiring. Finally, he said the words that would begin to explain why he was sitting there, why the room felt so painfully quiet, and why the news he was about to reveal was described as horrifying. Even though he delivered it with all the enthusiasm of someone explaining how a dishwasher works, he said, "There's something going on, something that's been going on for a while, and I think it's time people knew." His tone barely changed. His expression remained neutral, but the weight of the words, the heaviness beneath their dullness, made it clear Jay Leno was about to reveal something serious, something personal, something that even he struggled to articulate. He continued, "And, well, the truth is, it hasn't been easy." Jay paused again. He looked at his hands this time, rubbed his thumb along the edge of the paper, cleared his throat. It was the kind of clearing that people do when they aren't sick, just uncomfortable, emotionally uncomfortable. "It's not the kind of thing I'm used to talking about," he added. "And I know people probably expect, I don't know, something funny, but there's nothing really funny about this." He didn't look sad. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. A long, slow tiredness that doesn't shout but whispers. A tiredness that builds over months, maybe years, slowly thinning out the spark of the person carrying it. The camera, for a moment, zoomed in slightly, not dramatically, not suddenly, just enough to show the slight tremble in his eyelids, the faint tension in his jaw, the subtle weight of someone who had been holding back the truth for far too long. Jay continued, "So, here it is. 1 minute ago, I decided I wasn't going to hide this anymore. I wasn't going to pretend everything is fine, because it's not." Another pause, longer this time, too long for comfort, a pause that almost forced the audience to lean in. Even though the tone of his delivery remained monotonous, he went on, "There's something wrong, something with me, something I've been dealing with quietly, and I guess people deserve to know what's going on." His voice didn't shake, it didn't rise, it didn't fall. It stayed flat, painfully flat, making the words feel even more uncomfortable. He looked up at the camera again, eyes slightly glassy but not from tears, more from exhaustion. "I've always been the guy who jokes around, who keeps things light, but this time, well, there's no light." He swallowed. The room remained impossibly quiet. "I'm not going to get into everything right now. he added, tone steady, slow, deliberately boring, but it's serious, really serious. The way he said serious wasn't dramatic. It was dull, so dull that it made the seriousness feel even heavier. And I don't know what's going to happen next. Jay's fingers tapped lightly on the paper, not as a nervous gesture but as if he had forgotten they were moving at all. But I thought people should hear it from me, rather than from, rumors, or news, or whatever else. Another sigh, another long silence, another moment where even the background air seemed disinterested. And that's why I'm here, he finished quietly, to tell you that something is happening, something horrifying, something difficult, and something I can't ignore anymore. He paused, looked down, and whispered almost inaudibly, "It's time." The screen faded slightly, not dramatically, just a slow, boring fade. The fade out from the previous moment lingered for a few seconds longer than necessary, almost as if even the screen itself was unsure whether it should return. When it finally faded back in, Jay Leno was still there, same chair, same plain lighting, same folded hands resting with the same dull heaviness as before. Nothing had changed, but at the same time, everything felt slightly heavier. Jay inhaled again, not deeply, not dramatically, but in that same slow, tired way that made it seem like breathing itself required more effort than it should. He looked forward, not quite directly at the camera, but somewhere slightly above it, as though he couldn't decide which direction felt least uncomfortable. He began speaking again, the same flat tone carrying the same dull weight. "I guess there's more to explain." He didn't rush. He didn't adjust his posture. He simply continued sitting exactly where he was, shoulders slightly slumped, eyes a little dimmer than before. He said quietly, "I've always been the type of person who keeps things moving, keeps things light, makes people laugh. That's kind of what I do, right? But lately, that's been harder." He paused, blinking slowly. It wasn't the slow blink of someone who's sleepy, just someone who's tired in a deeper, more persistent way. "It's strange," he continued. "You spend your whole life doing something, and then suddenly, the things you took for granted, they start slipping away, little by little, quietly, and before you know it, you're sitting in a room like this trying to explain it." Another pause, another silence that stretched a bit too long, as though time itself had grown bored of waiting for him to continue. Jay's eyes drifted down to his hands again. He rubbed a thumb over his knuckles, not anxiously, but with the slow mechanical movement of someone lost in thought. "I didn't think I would have to talk about something like this," he murmured. "I thought, maybe I could just push through it, ignore it, pretend it wasn't happening. But the truth is, ignoring things doesn't make them go away. It just makes them grow in the background until they get too big." He sighed again, another small, unimpressive sigh, the kind that disappears the moment it happens. People always think that when something horrifying happens, it comes with some kind of big moment, a dramatic sound, a sudden shift. But honestly, most horrifying things, they happen slowly, quietly, boringly. He tilted his head slightly, almost a shrug. "And that's kind of what's been happening with me." His voice didn't break, his expression didn't change. He simply continued with the same bland, steady monotone as though reading instructions from a manual. "It didn't start suddenly," he said. "It started with small things. Things you wouldn't think about. Things that didn't seem important. But then they kept adding up, and I kept avoiding them."
He looked off to the side for a moment as though trying to recall something faint, something distant. For years, I thought I was invincible. Not in a dramatic way. Just in that normal, everyday, stubborn way where you assume nothing serious can happen to you because, well, it just doesn't fit the picture you have of yourself. A bitter, quiet half-laugh escaped him. It was flat, forced, and brief. "But life doesn't really care about that," he added. The room felt even quieter now. The air around him almost heavy with unspoken details he still hadn't shared. Jay slowly leaned back in the chair, not because he wanted to relax, but because he seemed to forget he was even supposed to sit upright. "I've been to more hospitals this year than I have in my entire life," he said bluntly. "No dramatic entrances. No rush. Just long hallways, plain waiting rooms, and that smell hospitals always have, you know the one. Clean, but tired. He paused again, letting the image sink in. And every time I thought, well, this is probably the last one. But it never was. There was always another appointment, another test, another thing someone wanted to check. He scratched the side of his head, almost absent-mindedly. The doctors are nice. Very nice, actually. But even when they're being nice, you can still tell when they're worried. You can see it in the way they look at you between sentences. His voice drifted into a lower register, still flat. I guess I didn't want people to see me like this. You know, older, slower, weaker. It's not a good look for someone who built a career on energy and laughter. Another sigh, another long silence. But eventually, you can't hide things forever. That's what I realized. People start noticing. They ask questions. They wonder why you're not appearing as much, or why you look different. He lifted a hand and pointed vaguely at his own face. Trust me, I can see it too. His tone remained mechanical, almost emotionless. There are days I wake up and I don't even recognize myself. Not on the outside, not on the inside. It's like I'm watching someone else live my life and I'm just tagging along. He looked away again. The horrifying part isn't the pain. It isn't the treatments. It isn't the tests. He paused. It's the feeling of losing control. Slowly, quietly, inch by inch. He swallowed. Not dramatically, just the way a tired person swallows. You think you're prepared. You think you can handle things. And maybe you can, for a while. But then, it gets heavier. A little more every day. He shifted slightly in the chair, the first meaningful movement he had made in several minutes. And that's why I'm talking about it now, he said dully. Because I realized pretending wasn't working. And hiding wasn't helping. And people deserve to know what's going on. He looked straight at the camera again, this time directly, but still with the same tired, boring expression.
This isn't some kind of dramatic announcement, he clarified. I'm not here to shock anyone. I'm just trying to tell the truth. The camera held on him in complete silence. And the truth is, things are bad. Worse than I've admitted. Worse than I wanted to believe. He blinked again. Slowly. I don't know how much time I have. Not in a dramatic sense. Just in terms of energy, strength, ability. He took another long, flat breath. And I think it's time people understood that. The screen dimmed a little, the way an old monitor does when it's been on too long. Jay remained seated, still, silent, thinking, not crying, not panicking, just existing. Finally, in a low, dull whisper, he said, "It's happening faster than I thought." The camera lingered on him, emotionless and unstirring. Then the scene faded, slowly, boringly, inevitably.